Welcome to KYNDversation, where we talk to people across fields and faiths to understand what their relationship to spirituality is and how they are being devoted to themselves and the God of their understanding. Today, I have a really special guest that I've known for over a decade. He is not only a colleague, but a dear friend. Bernard Owens is a TEDx speaker, author, and mental health clinician with over a decade of experience serving individuals at the intersections of crises, healing, and hope. Since 2015, he has worked on the front lines of community mental health in an intervention and crisis stabilization unit, supporting thousands navigating mental health and substance use challenges. A former Delta flight attendant, Bernard left aviation to answer a deeper call, earning his Master of Divinity from Candler School of Theology at Emory University, our alma mater. He works bridging theology and psychology, pairing evidence-based mental health interventions with deep empathy and practical wisdom. He is the author of the best-selling book, The Only Thing Wrong with You is That You Think Something's Wrong with You. A powerful invitation to release limiting beliefs and reclaim self-compassion. Bernard's message affirms that empathy, emotional intelligence, and courageous listening are essential to personal transformation and to building resilient, human-centered communities and workplaces. Let's welcome Bernard Owens. Welcome, Bernard.
Hey, Kendra. Good to be here. Thank you.
It's good to see you. How are you doing?
I'm good. I'm excited. You know, as always, when we get together, it's a spiritual exchange, really. And so I'm just glad to be here with you today. Kind of kick it and talk about things that we talk about every day when we're together or on the phone or whatever, having lunch.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Absolutely. So we met over a decade ago, and since then, a lot of things have shifted for you. You've been to seminary and so much more. What has been most transformed for you since we first met, Bernard? And I know that's a big question, so you can dive in wherever.
What has been most transformed for me, or I think we talked about at lunch, my aha moments, the largest one being, I'm actually a decent person. And it sounds, you even now, like trying that on to say it out loud, it feels a little, but I am. And so just coming to that realization at 42 years old was affirming for me. And that happened while in seminary at Candler. It just occurred to me one day in Con Ed, contextual education. We were all sitting around talking in class. And I was like, I'm a pretty decent person. So from there, just trying to embody that while also recognizing my humanness is the task, can be the challenge, but is also the immense beauty. So, yeah, I think that was the biggest aha moment for me, that I can start there and just know that inherently I'm worthy of whatever it is I set out to do.
That's strong, Bernard. And I think that speaks to the title of your book in terms of coming into that awareness at 42. The only thing wrong with you is that you think something is wrong with you. I love that title. How did you get to that title, and what transpired in your life to make you think? I'm assuming you thought you were wrong at some point, and then you had some aha moments.
Yeah, I like to, when I speak with a lot of my clients and the work that I do, I often hear the comparison through social media, the comparison through what their friends and peers are doing, and comparing that to their own lives and what they haven't done or what they didn't do right or what they didn't succeed at, and look at this person and what they're driving or what they own or how happy they seem. And it's always one of those things that I think that's a common question, a universal question we ask ourselves as human beings whenever we look around and not inward. Like, what is wrong with me that I'm not over there or doing that or have that or feel that you perceive that other people have? So that's where that started from. I was working with colleagues overnight, and I was, I just don't know what's wrong with me. Why can't I get blah, 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 blah? And one of my colleagues looked at me and said, who was frustrated with me because we'd had this conversation many times on the overnight shift, she just looked at me and said, Bernard, The only thing wrong with you is that you think there's something wrong with you. And then she just walked away. And I was like, so,
Wow.
you know, like
Wow.
profound. Like I sat in that and I was like, oh, okay, I do. That is the question that I'm not asking, or that is the statement that I'm making, that inherently there's something wrong with me, that I'm not here or there or wherever else I thought I should be.
Mm-hmm.
So those were a couple of the aha moments that I've had and led me to this place.
I love that, Bernard. I love that you had a coworker speak some life that you were able to sit in and not run from. I think comparison is something that continues with all of us at some point in our lives, where we're supposed to be this way or that way, but we're exactly who God has created us to be. Talk to me, Bernard, about your early beginnings and your relationship to spirituality. How have you seen that shift over time? Do you believe in God? Do you not believe in God? I know these are.
Yeah, I've seen it shift, but more than a shift, it's more like a gradient, right? Or an ombre, like a kind of a change, a slow, gradual change. And so one of the things I was thinking about earlier was the idea that I'm grateful that my mother introduced me to church, and my grandparents, my dad's parents, who helped raise my brother and myself, introduced us to church in a formalized, liturgical, every other Sunday we went, this is what we do. And it gets into your pores, it gets into your cells.
Mm-hmm.
And so although I don't consider myself worshiping in the same religious box that my grandparents worshiped in, I still am grateful for that foundation in so many ways, just being in that church. I can actually smell it now as I'm thinking about it, you know, being in that church and doing the first Sunday pageant, and just the dignity and the reverence that we showed the church, showing up in our best that we had to offer, and typically in our best behavior. Not always. My brother and I would be in the in the stand or directly across from the choir stand, so my grandmother could see us, and so we'd be punching each other and doing what young kids do, and she'd point, and we stop. So just those fond memories of someone caring enough to introduce me to Christianity. And my mom went to a lot of different faiths, which may explain my ecumenical approach to the work that I do, the way that I feel. And my mom kind of introduced me in a non-formalized way of there being different roads to God. And so, you know, that's one of the things I think about all the time in my work, because we see clients in my work that don't identify as the same thing as many of the staff. And it's up to us to be able to provide, and those protective factors that they use as spiritual and religious people, it's up to us to help nurture that, to get them up to where they know that they can be. A lot of this stuff is really, it's fundamentally about remembering who you came to this as. It's not so much as installing something new, it's just remembering who you already are as a divine creature. And that was one of the biggest takeaways I got from seminary, this idea of the Imago Dei, meaning created in the likeness of God. And so if I am created in the likeness of God, there is value. So I may have strayed away from your question, but those are something that shaped my spiritual formation.
No, you stuck right with it. Remembering is so important. I think so many people are waking up and remembering who they are, especially in the times that we're in. Before we got on, we were talking about all of the chaos that's happening in the world and how to still remain hopeful with everything that's happening. And you get an opportunity to support people in staying hopeful just by the work that you do as a mental health practitioner, Bernard. Talk to me how you got into being a mental health practitioner.
Wow. I think in a formalized education way, I got to be a mental health practitioner by, I left the airline as a flight attendant, knew I wanted to do something greater. Actually had a message from God when I was a flight attendant that I want you to speak. I want you to do something greater. And at the time that I got that message, I clearly remember saying, I know you're not talking to me because I don't want to, no, I know, ask somebody else. I'm fine. I'm scooping ice into the bucket. I don't want to, this is a good job. But the push kept going. Like, I want you to do something to speak to people. And that's what I do. And so we've talked about this before. For me, being in seminary was not an idea of pulpit ministry. My ministry always been to help the less fortunate, or to help marginalized peoples, or to help people who are often overlooked, for
Mm-hmm.
interchangeable terms in some ways. And it brings me immense joy in a lot of ways, because I know that is what God has put me here for. And at the same time, recognizing in my humanness that some of my past trauma informs the empathy and compassion that I am able to provide to my clients in a way that those who haven't experienced that level of trauma, or things happening in their lives, they can't access it. And that's fine.
Mm-hmm.
We all have um, different things to provide to each other. But I do believe in that God shows up through my actions. I don't need to talk to you about Christianity, about Buddhism, about Hinduism.
Mm-hmm.
I don't need to talk to you about that. I need to show up as who I say I am inherently, what runs through the core of me. And that's that Imago Dei, that likeness of God. And I want to say on your podcast, by no means do I always get it right. I mean,
Right.
whew, there are times where I
Yeah.
hear myself in my head and I'm like, oh man, I'm not making it to heaven, or on the metro, or nowhere with this type of attitude. So, it's just, it's always about realignment, though, about remembering
Yeah.
what I am here for. And,
Mm-hmm.
I know I've spoken to you before, like, spirituality and the practices that I use are so important to me to maintain and to keep connectedness to who I am as a child of God. Because if it were left up to me, I would literally, like right now, we wouldn't be doing this podcast. I'd be back there in the bed eating ice cream, watching soap operas. Like, it's like,
Mm-hmm.
left up to my
Mm-hmm.
humanness, I would just be in a cave by myself. And
Yeah.
so those reminders through God in terms of what I'm here to do are joyful, because they keep me connected to something greater than just art. Because
Mm-hmm.
Bernard on his own is pretty lazy. So
Yeah, I can definitely relate to that. I was just thinking earlier this morning that if I was not here, if I was only here just for myself,
right.
yeah,
Yeah.
I wouldn't be here with you either.
Yeah.
You have said some really good gems. I want to go back to your pivot from being a flight attendant to deciding to go off to seminary. So many people um, are challenged when there's such a big invitation to make a huge shift like that.
Hmm.
What was that journey like for you? Did you immediately say, "Okay, I'm going to stop," and then you pursue seminary? What happened in between that time?
I think mine were baby steps in answering that call. Like, I was very happy as a flight attendant, as the career. It's a great career. But I also knew that there was something expanding me. I'd be on the jump seat as a flight attendant, counseling other flight attendants, talking to them about, as they're showing me their kids and before there were cell phones, smartphones, we showed each other pictures in flip books, right? Brag books.
Mhm.
I remember talking to one lady, and she was telling me about her relationship with her son and how she wished it was better. But she also showed me a picture of her cat dressed up as Batman. And I talked through that with her. I was like, tell me, I want you to share it with me, if you can, how you can have a greater relationship with your pet than you can with the person you brought into this world. And what does
Mm.
that mean? Like, is there a chance to show that same type of unconditional love to your son? And, those conversations, and, she looked at me like, first of all, who the heck do you think you are? But I'm like, hey man, if we're going to sit here and have a real conversation, let's have a real conversation. And
Yeah.
so that's the genesis of those things for me. And also, I'll say too, in my humanness as a kid from like 8 years old, I had some codependency issues where I was taking care of my mom, and I took care of my mom all the way up into her passing. But when you, as a child, become adultified and are responsible
Mhm.
for regulation of an adult, you then become an adult. And
Mhm.
you then learn how to listen. You then learn how to anticipate when they're upset, so you can do whatever you need to do to offset that. And so in a lot of ways, that's the practical. But I think, had I not had those traumatic experiences, I still would be here doing this work, because there's something about
Mhm.
that can see a person across the store in Target looking around into the ceiling, and I'll say, "What are you looking for?" And they'll say Tide, and I say it's down the aisle. That's just who I am. And sometimes I need to temper that, and sometimes I do temper that, because I have to believe that they'd find the Tide whether I were in the store or not. But there
Yeah.
is that pull in me to help if I see that the help is needed.
I love that. It reminds me of an experience that I have. I used to sell security systems at Brinks, and as I was preparing for people's security systems and planning it out, most of the time I would end up just sitting with them.
Yeah.
Sometimes praying with them, sometimes holding space as they cried.
Right.
And at that point, I knew that it was time for me too to go to seminary. But
Yeah.
no, you said something that I think is really important. There are going to be so many people that are looking at this who um, are the parentified child. They were parents to their adult caregivers, and they
Mhm.
were adultified at a really young age. A lot of people hold resentment, and for understandably so, and anger. One of the things you say in your TED talk is that everything you thought you knew about your parents is wrong. What has that journey been like for you in terms of healing and reconciling that?
Whew. This is why you and I can't get together. I'm already becoming emotional.
Okay, because you're gonna make me become emotional too,
And I
Bernard.
apologize. It's when I hear people talk about their relationship with their parents and the idea that adultification, it is a real thing. But I got to tell you, and I've told you this before, being the adult for my mom is the greatest honor of
Mm,
my life. It
wow.
really is. But I do remember my dad saying to me, because I was so concerned about my mom, that he said to me in a pragmatic way, as my dad is, very practical, said, "You can't help your mother until you help yourself." And so I did. I began the work of working on myself. And sometimes it required me detaching myself from all of my mom's problems, staying connected, but detaching myself from all of her problems
Mm,
so that I could be steady. So when she really needed me, which is what happened, towards the end of her life, I
mm,
could be rock solid. And I tell you, Kendra, I've told you this before. I've said it in my TED talk. Being able to be there for my mom and as she transitioned, as she died, being right there unabashedly, not shying away from it, holding her hand is the greatest
mm.
joy of my life. And that could have happened had I not done this work. So
No, thank you for your vulnerability, Bernard. I'm interested in learning more about, because you had to do some work before you got to that point, right?
right,
If you hadn't done the work that you did, you wouldn't have been able to journey with your mom through her last leg of this particular living experience.
right.
What
Yeah.
did some of that work look like for you?
Well, I think it started at a very young age with my dad telling me to take care of myself before I could take care of her. And I had, I talk about that in my book, and in the TEDx. I talk about my own battle with depression and suicidality and 2 failed suicide attempts. And just the idea that, okay, if I'm brave enough to try that, I'm brave enough to make it. And so I started
Mm-hmm.
there at Michigan State University. It was a condition of my staying enrolled since I, attempted to end my life in the dormitory. It really was a blessing because it got me connected with mental health services. And from there, my journey of healing began, slow and steady, on and off, but acute when I needed it. I got the care that I needed so that I could then be there for my mom and whoever else has needed me in the past, because I know what it takes to get me back, what it takes to get Bernard back to rock solid, right?
Yeah.
Through prayer, through meditation, to uh, subliminal healing, through exercise, through eating right when I'm
Mhm.
not eating ice cream, through all of these practices. And I mentioned the ice cream because I don't want anybody watching this to think that because you and I have gone through seminary, we got it down perfect. We don't.
Mm.
We know how to remember how to get back to the best
Yeah.
of ourselves. And that's
Yeah.
what's most important. And you're
Yeah.
only able to get back to the best of yourselves through remembrance when you do the work.
Mhm.
Right?
Mhm.
And so
Absolutely.
one of my greatest gifts, when my dad said that to me about take care of yourself first, one of my greatest gifts through therapy and through my work is understanding that my parents are human beings that had lives and experiences and trauma and joys and expectations and hopes. They had all of those things before I showed up, right?
Mhm.
And so when you start to look at your parents as full human beings who aren't just supposed to provide for you, you're really able to access, or at least I should speak for myself, I was really able to access a level of grace, compassion, and empathy that I didn't know was possible. And maybe
Mhm.
that's what people experience when they have kids. I don't have kids, that type of unconditional love. But it was only until I knew both of their stories that I was able to access that and take myself out of the picture in order to be present for them.
Mhm. Mhm. That's thank you for sharing that, Bernard. I am really thankful that as you describe it, healing is a lifelong journey. It's a process.
Mhm.
As a Black man who entered into therapy at a young age, what can you say for those Black men who might be looking at this, who are struggling, maybe with some mental health vulnerabilities, maybe with just life's transitions, and they're thinking about going to therapy, but they are on the fence? What would you
Mhm.
say to them, Bernard?
I think for anybody thinking about therapy, but they're on the fence, you have to sit quietly and get real with yourself about what's keeping you from that therapy.
Mhm.
And there's there's a mental health practitioner, I believe he may be a psychiatrist. His name is Gabor Mate, and he talks about those of us who use substances, whatever the substances, alcohol, drug use, whatever the substances you
Mhm.
use, in a lot of ways, they may have saved your life, right?
Yeah.
So when you have these conversations with yourself, you know whether you're drinking excessively, you know whether you have to wake up and go to bed by smoking marijuana, you know that you are, if you're being promiscuous and out there doing all types of things sexually um, that aren't for your good in unsafe ways, you know that
Mhm.
in the core of you. And so when you have these quiet conversations, you can access help, but if it requires bravery, and it doesn't even have to be loud. When I first went to therapy after my first attempt at ending my life, the therapist had a document on the document it said, "Circle what's troubling you," right? For a bunch of issues,
Mhm.
which actually made it easier. But I circled the number that I had an issue. Mine was gay and lesbian issues, or so I thought, which really was just
Gotcha.
was a piece of what I was dealing with.
Mhm.
I went into the therapist. He was like, "Well, tell me what you're here for." And I said, "Well, it's number 9." Like I couldn't even say it. I couldn't even articulate it. It's number 9. So luckily he had the sheet in front of him and he could go, "Oh, number 9, you want to talk about blah, blah, blah." And so
Mhm.
there's a lot of stigma I think that we have to get
Yeah.
past, and a lot of stigma that we deal with. And particularly as African Americans and African American men, you've got to be strong. Don't let them make you crazy. Don't let them tell you you're crazy. But they see you drinking every night. They see you smoking every night. That's more acceptable than you going and getting the help that you could benefit from that could elevate your entire life.
Yeah.
And the other thing I wanted to say about therapy is in 2026, nobody's got to know. You can open your laptop, you can sit there and get well what's on your mind and talking to your therapist as if there's someone, a friend or someone you trust,
Mhm.
and get the help you need and close your laptop and go about your life. And you'll see if you do that incrementally, you'll start to see slow, steady changes in how you think about things, how you approach things, how you view yourself, how you view others, how you understand the world around you. Um, yeah, I mean that at least that was my experience. It was a slow,
Mhm.
steady race. And you talked about earlier about getting to know ourselves. I also want to say that's a lifelong journey. Getting to
Yeah.
know yourself and doing the work is a lifelong journey. And sometimes you take breaks. Sometimes
Mhm.
you go AWOL. Sometimes you go MIA. But as long as you come back to it, you can, you can be better and do better. It's not about being
Mhm.
somebody different. It's about just improving on what God has already provided you with.
Mhm. I love that. It's not about being somebody different, but improving what God has already given you
Yeah.
or expanding it.
It's-
Thank you for that, Bernard. When you think about um, the practices that you have, you listed so many practices from prayer to meditation to subliminal healing. What is subliminal healing for those who don't know? And how did you get started with that?
Now, God started with subliminal hearing, hearing two at 54, subliminal hearing two, that's going as well. But no, I got started with subliminal healing, maybe introduced through affirmations, right? I think it's a common thing that we do nowadays is we put affirmations on our walls or, just
Mhm.
feel good sayings. In the same way that if you're playing violent video games or listening to music that has violence in it, you may think that you're just nodding your head to the beat. But don't you notice when you use those types of songs, you really push through a workout, you really like "Rrr, rrr," ready because it's
Mhm.
seeping into your cells. It's seeping into your spirit.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not judging that, because I listen to, to hype music too when I need to.
Mm-hmm.
But I also recognize when it's time to turn it off, because it starts to seep into your consciousness. And so when we talk about subliminal healing, we talk about, for me, a guided meditation, and they're easy to find on YouTube or, other places online, where you really just sit and listen, and it takes you down, and it counts you down from 10 to 9. And then the next thing you know, you're in 1. And by the time you get to 1, a lot of times I'm done with the meditation and realize I think I was asleep. But that's relaxation. Being asleep is relaxation. Mm-hmm. So the hypnotic meditation puts you in a place where you're suggestible to positive reinforcement, just in the way that you're suggestible to violent video games, or music, but just in things that can benefit you and fortify you and build you up. Mm-hmm. So part of my daily practice. So I'll do hypnotic meditation, which is guided. I may want to focus on a specific issue. You could do that with cessation of smoking or decreasing alcohol intake, all of those things. But when you do them consistently, it's not an acute thing where you realize, oh, it's a slow thing, and you realize in your back, you're standing up a little taller, and you look at people in the eye, and it becomes second nature. Much like when you're listening to hype music or whatever, to keep using that example, and it comes to the body, right? So it's the same way. And so I think that's a great way to approach accessing your spirituality is through meditation. And I like to think of it like this, and I think someone else described it like this. Regular meditation is like a shotgun, right? Where with a shotgun, the pellets come out wide and far. Mm-hmm. With hypnotic meditation, it's a rifle. It's shot. The shot is direct, and it's focusing on one particular issue that you want to address. So sometimes for me, it's anxiety. And if I want to do that, I do with a shotgun, laser focus. Now, if I want to address overall well-being, then I'll do a guided meditation, more like a shotgun. But the rifle is the hypnosis. It's the best analogy I can come up with for that.
No, that's perfect. Thank you for the differentiation and for explaining what subliminal healing is, because folks can tap into that. I like to listen. Joe Dispenza has some wonderful meditations out there, especially when it comes to your desire to quantum leap or pick another possibility or new opportunity in the quantum field.
Yes.
Really, really good for that. And you mentioned something that I think is super important, that it's a slow process. We want so many things to be instantaneous in our world, especially when we have access to all platforms of social media and AI. It's immediate. The work of healing is progressive, and it is slow. Sometimes what we start doing may take us 3 weeks, a month, a year, years to really anchor into. One of the things that you mentioned earlier, Bernard, is that your grandmother had this religious box of church that she was there, which you benefited from. And then your mom exposed you to more ecumenical experiences when it came to your faith. What ecumenical experiences were those, and how did you expand your own beyond that?
So for my mom, it was still Christianity, but it was different means of Christianity, or different methods. So it was a Baptist church, or it was a Church of God in Christ, or it was a Unitarian church, or it was, I think it was great because it showed me. And it also, when you taste a little bit of everything like that, it shows you what resonates with you. And if I may, I'll give an example. I attend a church here in Atlanta called Vision Church of Atlanta. And it's Pentecostal based. Well, I grew up Methodist Episcopal, and in the Methodist Episcopal tradition, we worship very quietly, very, more sedate. So that's what resonates with me. So sometimes, even though I love my church, it becomes hyped, lively. And so for me, I go within, and I can find myself deep within and tears streaming down my face, where everybody else around me is experiencing the Holy Spirit in a different way. And so what I want to say about that ecumenical approach is it's okay. Like however you access God is for you. It's okay. But the great thing about it, like Baskin Robbins ice cream used to say 31 flavors, right? Where you can go and you can sample different things and see what speaks to you. And that's what my mom's journey was able to allow me to do. Through her searching, I was able to kind of figure out what works for me and what doesn't work for me. And so now, although I guess I'm in a little bit of both, like, if I'm attending a Pentecostal-based church, but still having my own quiet moments, it's like a hybrid of things, but definitely explore those things. You got to explore them for yourself and see what feels good to you and what doesn't.
Absolutely. Shout out to Bishop O.C. Allen. I love the worship experience at the Vision Church. And I love that your mom introduced you to different variations of the Christian experience. One thing that you mentioned earlier, Bernard, is that you don't have to be labeled as any particular religion. You want people to see who you really are, the heart from which you move in, how your character is, what your integrity is like. How did you get to that point?
We're just going to keep it real. I got to that point through dealing in my life, working in my life, being around people in my life who identified as Christian, but did not embody the virtues of Christ. That was disconcerting for me. You can't talk about your love of God and how Jesus has anointed you and you're a prophetess and you have no compassion for other people who don't look, act, and speak like you do. It still rattles my brain how people are able to do that. So if that's Christianity in that way, I don't want any part of it. Dr. Allen talked about this the last time I was in service. Like, you got to twist it if you think that's what God is. And in a lot of ways, I think the term was used, stolen identity. You've basically hijacked the identity of Jesus and turned it into something that Jesus never intended. If you are about love and empathy and advocacy, read the text. That's not what he was about. So I think it's important to be honest with yourself. It's important to not only read the Bible and go to church, it's important to do your own inner work, therapeutic work, so you can realize when you're speaking about God, but being horrible to other people. The two just can't. They don't fit together.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's just like people who claim to be super spiritual, but they don't treat people well. That inconsistency, like you said, requires you to do the work. And I think so oftentimes the people who identify as Christian, who are Christian fundamentalists or Christian traditionalists, it can be very difficult to really do the work to move beyond believing God hates who you hate and God loves only who you love. Because that's just not true. If we believe in the Imago Dei, that everybody, regardless of faith, regardless of religious background, sexual orientation, gender identity, is a child of God. So thank you for naming that, Bernard. When it comes to your own journey of, because one of the things that you mentioned too is that you identify within the LGBTQ community. As a gay man, what was that like? Given that your mom had a very ecumenical introduction to you of Christianity, and all of the denominations that you name and even are different. What was your journey like accepting yourself?
It was hard, but it wasn't hard because I was fortunate. It wasn't hard because of anything my parents said or did. It was hard because of the standards that I imposed on myself. Always do good in school, try to be polite, try to be respectful, all those things of what a good person does. Yet this piece at the time didn't fit into my idea of what a good person is. And that's the issue I have, I think, sometimes with traditional Christianity, the original sin piece. It's like, if I am created in the image of God, God just decided to install a little bit of hardware that makes me a horrible person that I need to come to him and repent for. Like, those are the things that don't fit for me. And so, it wasn't an easy journey, and with my parents, at least with my mom, it took her some time, but I had to realize also that this was a person who dedicated their lives to having children or taking care of their children or being there for their children, who her dream was turned upside down, right? Because of course she had a dream for me. And so that's where that compassion piece comes in. Like, I understand for me, I can't fulfill that dream, but there are other ways that we can be connected to each other. And I would hope that you would honor and see who you created, who you helped to create, who you helped to form,
Mhm.
human being. That has nothing to do with whether or not I provide you with grandchildren. And I think she was able to see that like that. And like I said, it wasn't until I was 42 that I was like, I'm a good person. So I couldn't expect, and so when I started operating like that, I think she could see more of that. So
Mhm.
again, with that inner
Mhm.
work, I want to say this, Kendra, like the work for me in my life, it is an evolution of me working on me. You can't change other
Yeah,
people. I talk about this in the book. I talk about this in the TED Talk.
absolutely.
You can't change other people. The only thing you can change is you.
Mhm.
The quiet benefit of you working and changing you is that other people around you start to change. Other
Yes.
people start to change. They
Yeah.
adapt to who you now are. So
Mhm.
um, I don't know. That's been a really big lesson for me. Like I can't change them, but I can change how I operate. So you're not going to get a rise out of me despite I'm looking over there like you're not going to get a rise out of me at work despite your behavior
Mhm.
because I can control my emotions. I work to control my emotions, and me controlling my emotions upsets you even more, but that's just a byproduct. You have to deal with that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We do have to do our work. And thank you for doing your work, Bernard. Thank you for saying
Ongoing,
yes to life.
ongoing process, right? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that you mentioned in your TED talk was that we all walk around with narratives about who people are, but those narratives are often incomplete.
Mhm.
Um, as just talking through how some of these fears and walls go up because we're making assumptions. How do you reduce the assumptions that you make about people? Or do you make assumptions about people and then go back and remember what you've committed to? How does that work for you?
So that's a great question, and that's where that humanness shows up. Like I find it easier for me to not make assumptions and be completely open when I am in my work. Maybe sometimes in personal life at the gym or wherever I'm out in public,
Mhm.
I'm a little more anxious and a little less trusting of where are you coming from, and that's my own stuff. But that's also a byproduct of trauma that I've suffered, right? And so I think human beings are naturally prone to categorize things, and all the red blocks go over here, all the blue circles go over there.
Yeah.
It makes it safer. And so that's one of the things I work to override is that just having a guardedness against people in outside of work at work because
Mhm.
I know they're in a specific role. Even when I was a flight attendant, it was much easier to be a flight attendant because I know I have this uniform on and I'm in this role and I know how to do this role, right?
Mhm.
I know how to connect with people and all of those things because I know ultimately you want me to provide you with a service so you can
Yeah.
get from Houston to Detroit, right? And so I know all the things that go into that. It's like I said, it's work for all of us.
It is. You mentioned the word compassion earlier. What has compassion meant for you and why is it important?
Ooh, compassion for me means taking a beat and stepping back from whatever I think is going on to consider maybe there's a different, like you talked about quantum physics, mechanics, like maybe there's a different thing going on than what I perceive. And I
Mhm.
want to share with you, you talked earlier about me being a flight attendant and how I knew that I was going to be moving on to this. And, I had a woman on a flight one time and I was 20 something years old and she got on the flight and she was incredibly rude. She wanted me
Mm.
to put her bag over her head and she was just really rude and entitled, at least that was my perception. And I don't know what came over me, Kendra, because I hadn't been to seminary, but I had done the work on me from undergraduate school.
Mhm.
And she was being rude to me and I just knelt down next to her
Mm.
and I just looked her in her face and I said, what is what is going on? I said, this can't be about me. You don't even know me. What is going on? And she started crying. And she
Mm.
said, my husband is in the cargo hold. And I was like, what? My husband was killed while we were on vacation. He's in the cargo hold and we're taking him home to bury him. That
Wow.
is what I'm talking about. Those are the shifts that God provides us when we step back. Because I was ready to go off. All of Detroit was ready to come up out of me. And so all of Detroit, all 7 miles come up out of me. You see 8 Mile. Well, 7 Mile is the prequel, right? So it was about to come up. And I don't know, I stopped and just knelt down. Now, in hindsight, I realized she could have punched me all in my face, but I just knew something was like, this ain't about me. Uh,
Yeah.
And so I find myself doing that, whether I'm at work or not at work, because the world is so tense now.
Mm-hmm.
The world is so tense. People are worried about. I went through TSA the other day, and the TSA guy embarrassed me so bad. Yelled at me, "Did you not hear me say all electronics out of the bag?"
Wow.
And maybe a part of me heard him say that, but if you've gone through security and TSA, it's a lot of things going on. There was a family in front of me with kids, all of these things are swirling. And I stopped when he said that, and I just thought to myself, this must be a tough job where every day you have to, remind people of things that you think they should inherently know because they've been on airplanes before. And I breathed, I took a breath, and I was like, okay. Now he still rattled me a little bit because I felt in my humanness, I was like, I didn't deserve that. But there was a part of me with compassion to be able to make that shift and say, this must be a tough job. But you got to do this every day and feel like people aren't listening to you. So those are the things where it shows up for me in everyday life in practical ways.
Wow. I love how compassion is connected at some level to our ability to stop, pause, and just take a breath.
Right.
To consider a different perspective.
Yeah.
That it may not be what we perceive it is at first sight. Right. Which is so needed in today's time. Like you said, there's so much fear and anxiety in the world, and things are moving fast. We need people.
Yeah.
Absolutely. That can slow down. So thank you for slowing down. I wonder what that ride would have been like for that woman had you not stooped down and just checked in on her. Sometimes it's much easier for us to practice compassion with others than it is for ourselves. How has your journey of self-compassion been throughout the years?
I think when I started offering myself compassion, it was easier to lend it out. Like, it's easier for me to give you $10 if I've got $1 million, right? Like if I got treasure here, I can give you a little piece of it. It's not gonna hurt me, right? But it's up to me to increase and nurture my treasure so that I can give you a little piece if you need it. So I think the self-work is like a pot of gold. Like I got a pot of gold here. So if you want to go off on me in TSA, take this little piece, and I'm gonna protect my gold by not losing it on you. And those are in my way, Kendra. That's how God shows up for me. I don't want to talk to you about verse, whatever. I don't want to talk to you about that. I want you to see how I'm able to access. And I wanted to share too with you. There was a time when my brother and I were in foster care when we were kids. And I remember that would have been my first, I think it felt like, maybe it wasn't, but it felt like my first formal introduction to God, because the foster mother had us get on our knees and pray. And there was a picture of a white Jesus on the wall, right? And I just was like, she said, now I lay me down to sleep. I pray the Lord my soul to keep. If I should die before I wake, I pray the Lord my soul to take. And somehow that was comforting for me, being in foster care and knowing that my mom loved us, but for whatever reason wasn't able to be there for us at that time. And I didn't know it until many years later. I didn't think about that. A lot of times in different traditions, and it's all good, but a lot of us worship that white Christ on the wall, that white Jesus on the wall. And when I got to the point where I realized I'm a good person, I'm a passionate person, I'm a loving person, forget the picture on the wall. I can access the Christ in me.
Wow.
Two different things. And it's something to be able to get there, because I should have been gone. Left up to myself, I should have been gone by now for a lot of people. So, the introduction to Jesus on the wall all the way to 2026, where I'm introducing the Christ in me. So.
Yeah. Oh, that's good, Bernard. That's rich. This conversation about the Christ within, Christ consciousness, reminds me of just some things that I was thinking about yesterday in terms of, I pulled from a scripture where it says, in my Father's house are many mansions, that Jesus was not talking about a destination somewhere. Jesus was talking about a state of consciousness. Jesus was inviting the disciples to join him in his own way of being in consciousness. Not to worship him, but to follow what he was essentially doing, what the Christ within him was leading him to do. Tell me more about this concept of Christ consciousness. Where did you learn about it from? And
I think the Christ consciousness journey or exploration for me started going to a Unity church. Um, Going to a Unity church just kind of helped me to see. We talk about the metaphysical. We talk about energies and things that how so much of what you think manifests what shows up in your life. So I believe that Jesus didn't just show up for us to worship him. Those lessons that he talked about, those demonstrations that he showed us over and over again, I can do this and so can you, better than me if you trust him, right? And so I see that and I feel that. And I constantly deal with my humanness, but I also know when I access that part of me, there's no stopping. And I do think in my humanness, that's one of the things that frustrates me is when in our work where we're tasked to help people, that a lot of people are resigned and they give up. They said we can't do such and such, so I guess we're not gonna do it. And I am the one who's like, yeah, they said we couldn't do that, but what else can we do? How can we get around? How can we get over it? How can we take what they said and turn it upside down? And that's just who I am at this point. You don't go from being suicidal at 12 and 21 to writing a book and giving a TEDx without turning things around, turning it upside down.
Right.
And I'm only mentioning those accolades to give a demonstration of what is possible when you access the greater in you. Like, there ain't nothing special about me other than I did the work and I accessed something greater than me. And so I hope that whoever is watching this can understand. I think a lot of times when people believers say, I'm anointed or I'm a prophetess or God chose me, maybe that's true, maybe it's not. But God can choose and chooses everybody who can access what is provided at birth.
Absolutely. That's big. And that statement in and of itself is gold. You refer to God being like a pot of gold, and it is that God is attached to the God that you're able to access because you do your work. Right. It's the same source, but that source operates differently in all of us, particularly when we're willing to do our work. Thank you for doing your work, Bernard. And for being willing to share the goal that you have with others, even when you might be met with opposition or challenge or indifference, because I think that's what the world needs more of.
Yeah. And I want to say, Kendra, you mentioned earlier that the work is hard, and it is hard. But I also want to say that the work is forgiving. It's so forgiving. It's like I could not go to church for a year, but I go back for a Sunday and everything. It's muscle memory, right? Those of you watching this that work out, like you can skip the gym for months, and the first 2 sessions when you go back is like, oh my goodness. But then by the 3rd session, you're like, I'm in this, right? And so it's the same thing with when you're on the healing journey or on the spiritual journey. When you're away, you can be away, but when you come back, if you dedicate yourself to constantly coming back, it's such a beautiful thing. And I said this, and I used to say this in seminary. I thought that God had turned his back on me. And I know I've heard this other places heard it said in different ways, but God had never turned his back on me. It was me who turned away from God, trying to figure it out on my own, or being prideful, or being in my personhood, right?
Yeah.
God doesn't turn away from us. So yes, it can be tiring to do the work, but it's very forgiving when you decide to jump back in. And it starts to pick up. And it's like you never. So yeah, sometimes I think we can get caught in lack of spiritual care and beat ourselves up for that. But yeah, I think that's part of it. It's the up and down.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm grateful that you brought in this word forgiveness. That we can choose to lean into forgiveness for ourselves and others at any point, particularly for ourselves. That is a process. There's a whole institution of forgiveness. And I didn't know there was an institute of forgiveness until I had to preach about forgiveness one Sunday. In this institute, it talks about the process of forgiving. So often we think that forgiveness is instantaneous. And sometimes it is. Sometimes it isn't, and that's okay. To give ourselves grace when we are on the journey. And this work of healing is about being on a journey, not being consumed with the destination.
Right.
And again, I'm so grateful that you continue to say yes to the journey, Bernard.
Yeah, it is. It is the work the largest part of my work on myself has been about self-forgiveness. And it's so easy. I feel like it's easy to forgive other people. You stepped on my shoe. I mean, they're new shoes, but it's cool. I'll wipe them
Yeah.
off. Don't worry about it. We can, in my life, I'm able to forgive other people a lot easier than I'm able to forgive myself. You know, if I make a mistake, have been times where I just ruminate on, why did I do that? Why did I say that? But when I step away from it, I'm like, what are you doing? And that's where, for me, the meditation and the self-hypnosis helps, because it just cuts to, what benefit are you getting out of feeling guilty? What's your payoff for constantly beating up on yourself? What's the product? Because yes, you feel guilty, but you keep rubbing it like a sore, like a lump. Keep rubbing. What are you getting out of it? And so when you start to do the hypnosis, you can. My goal is to remove myself of guilt for things that I have done or said, and you slowly start to. Okay, right. So all of this work, at least in my journey, has been about forgiving myself, because when you are empathetic and compassionate, you care about other people. So if you think you've hurt somebody else, it stays with you, right? And so you also have to do the work of asking their forgiveness, but also working on forgiving yourself and doing better.
That's good. Absolutely. Asking for forgiveness as well as doing the work to forgive yourself. Thank you for that. For those that are going to be listening, some people are going to be viewing, what's one practice that you can offer at the top of your mind for people to be able to move into deepened compassion, whether that is for themselves or for others or both?
A practical way to access compassion, a practical way is to think about when you've been misunderstood. What would it feel like for them to have taken a moment to step into your world? Right? Think about that. How much better do you think you would have felt if someone had taken a moment just to shift into your position, just to shift into what your life is like, just for a minute to experience it? And so if you truly want to access compassion and empathy for other people, think about the times that you felt injustice, the times that you felt wrong, the times that you felt misunderstood, and that hope, that wish, be it expressed or not, that somebody would make the shift for you and just try to see what your life is like, what your experience is like for a minute.
Empathy is super important in remembering that we are another other. We are all interrelated beings who operate in both shadow and light. So thank you for that, Bernard. When it comes to someone, because you have navigated ups and downs of your perception about God and your relationship with God, someone might be rethinking their relationship with God because of parental or church wounds. Do you have any gentle wisdom to offer them?
Oh yeah, that's the part where I talked about God hasn't turned away from me. I turned away from God.
Yeah.
There was a time in my life where I had been working in a church in a capacity and was sexually harassed by someone in the higher echelon of the church. And then I stopped going to church, and then I got mad at God, and then I stopped worshiping, and then I stopped, every time the idea of it with spirituality or God would come up in my head, I would right? And then it occurred to me one day, like, wow, you're letting this person cheat you out of your whole relationship with the divine. Your whole relationship with your God-given birthright? You let one person cheat you out of that because from your view, they were wrong?
Yes.
And that was big for me. That was big. I was like, oh no, you're not made me feel bad and you put me in a terrible position, but you're not costing me that. And so I would say to anybody who's struggling with God, with what has happened to you or happened in your life where you felt like maybe God wasn't there for you, or you don't know how to access God, or you went to church and they said something bad about people who are like you, just know that human beings do not determine your relationship with God, because this question about theology for another hour. And at the end of the day, none of us really know with hard printed out proof where we're going or what happens after this life. So all of those people making you feel like they know, they don't know. They don't know for sure. They don't know any more than you do. They have an idea. They have a feeling. But just know that your relationship with God is your relationship. And I want to distinguish and instill, I think we talked about it a little bit earlier, the difference between spirituality and religion, right? You can turn away from God, but God is still right there with you, whether you want the Creator to be there with you or not. And it shows up in a whisper. You should try to take that test. A little, a little tickle in your ear.
Mm-hmm.
Why don't you give that a shot? Like God is always guiding you. That's your intuition. That's the Holy Spirit speaking to you in different ways. Now, when we get around other people, and the whisper might be, you should go back to college, but you get around somebody else who's never gone to college or doesn't think anything is possible in life other than their current circumstances. Of course, they're going to tell you can't do it. And then there you go, pushing that intuition, that whisper, that God speaking you down. Because some people can't do it. The human doesn't know. Beware of people who have never done in their lives what you aspire to do.
Absolutely. Thank you for your transparency, Bernard, and for naming what you just named, and also for sharing a little bit of that story of being harmed by someone who was in spiritual authority. I think it can be so easy to leave an institution, and when you leave the institution, you also leave God. For a lot of people, I have found that so many Black folks or people in the African diaspora, we don't leave God. We usually go on this journey of trying to discover something other than what we experience, and we end up having a renewed relationship with the God of our understanding. Kendall said last week or yesterday rather, about not outsourcing our spiritual authority. And that's what you decided to do after that experience, which is powerful, Bernard, because so many people can go into really, I know I went into a deep depression after being harmed by someone in spiritual authority, and really having to do the work to be able to enter into faith communities, having a hard time trusting people in spiritual authority, because I'm not going to say more often than not, but there are so many spiritual leaders who say one thing and do another thing, who are missing character and integrity.
Let me ask you something, or let me give you my slant on that.
Yeah.
I tell you, the great thing about my vocation as a spiritual practitioner and as a mental health practitioner is, once I got away from that church and even the person who kind of did me wrong or victimized me, per my opinion, right? After I started doing clinical work and studying psychology, I feel sorry for him. Like, he's an alcoholic. Like, and this is no shade, but it's like, yeah, okay, I kind of get it. Like, I'm not mad at you. Like, you're doing the best you can do. I mean, it's not cool, and it's not an excuse. It's an explanation.
Yeah,
that's a distinction, right? And so when I started doing the clinical work, I was like, oh, okay, like, yeah, okay. I hope you get the work. I hope you get the help you need, and it's going to take more than you just, throwing around the word of God. But at that, once I realized I was fine and could extricate myself and move forward, I was depressed, but not. Once I started, I guess you get my point. Like, once you start to see them like from a different lens, and that's what's been beautiful, using my clinical hat in conjunction with my spirituality. It's been like having glasses with bifocals. Right?
Yeah. Absolutely. No, you bring up a really good point, because I feel like for particularly in my experience, I had to not take it personally.
Yeah.
Because this is really systemic. It's a systemic issue in terms of the ways in which some people and a lot of people in spiritual authority can do harm and just keep it moving. Because somewhere in there, we are misaligned with holding the balance of our spirituality. We can really taking care of ourselves spiritually, and also leading an organization, being organizationally structured, which is part of the reason why I'm doing the work again. And I think even doing the work in organizational trauma when it comes to faith communities. In light of this conversation, it is clear that the church needs to heal. But
I'll say that
church needs. Go ahead, Bernard.
I agree. The church needs to heal, but the church has to know it's sick. You can't heal if you don't know you have a malady, right? So, and maybe the church will never know it has a malady, but if you're in it and you know something ain't right, you got to take care of yourself. You can't take care of your mama until you take care of yourself. You can't take care of your church until you take care of yourself. And then when you start to take care of yourself, you realize, hey, y'all can do what you want, but I'm taking this pot of gold somewhere that is going to help me invest it in the stock market and help me elevate. That's what I'm doing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot, but don't let. Again, I would say don't let anyone cheat you of your divine connection.
That's good. That's
good.
good.
It's really all you have. It's really all you have. I can't tell you how many times, for me, God has showed up in my life through other people, through people I didn't expect. I mean, even you, right? We didn't know each other, and a friend thought that we should get together and talk.
Yeah.
And I've told you before, I didn't really know what they did at a seminary until you and I started talking, and I certainly didn't think I was worthy of that. So I told you it was a year or two in that I was like, I'm a decent, right? And so I think it's important for us to surround ourselves with people who are vibrating higher than we are so that we can level up.
That's good.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for these words of wisdom, these nuggets to carry with us, Bernard. Where can people find you if they want to access the book, if they want to find you on social media? Where should they look?
So you can find me on Instagram at Bernard Owens Jr., where I'm going to be revamping that soon. And then you can find me on Facebook, same name, Bernard Owens Jr. If you'd like to purchase a copy of the book is autobiographical in many ways, but it's not just my story. There are lessons that I've learned along the way that are practical lessons for life, for your life. So those are fewer places. And if you're interested in seeing a video or seeing what I do, feel free to put Bernard Owens or Bernard Owens Jr. into YouTube. My TEDx is there. There's some interviews that I've done there. So there are a lot of different ways to access some of the things that I've been able to provide ever since Kendra Frazier introduced the idea that I could be something greater and maybe go to seminary. I could do something greater with my life.
I'm so glad you're here. Thank you for letting us know where we can find you. We look forward to seeing you all next Wednesday for another KYNDversation. Bye-bye.